The camera clicked and the room went silent. The doctor wasn't taking those photos for medical records anymore, and she knew it the second she turned the screen toward the man in the black suit. Because the bruises on the waitress's body weren't about to end up in a police file, they were about to start a war. If this story pulled you in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow. And while you're here, jump into the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. All right, let's get back into it. I need you to stay still, Alina whispered, her voice calm despite the fury burning behind her sternum. This was the 4th visit in 3 months. 4th time Liv had appeared after midnight with new bruises and old excuses, walked into a cabinet, tripped on the stairs, slipped getting out of the shower. But tonight, Alina wasn't just treating injuries. Tonight, she was documenting evidence that would never see the inside of a courtroom. No. Liv's hand shot out, fingers wrapping around Alina's wrist with surprising strength for someone so battered. Please, no pictures. Alina set down the gauze and met her patient's terrified gaze. The younger woman sat on the exam table in a wrinkled white button-down shirt, the fabric spotted with dried blood near the collar. Her dark hair fell in tangled waves past her shoulders, framing a face that should have been beautiful, but was instead a canvas of violence. A deep purple bruise spread across her left cheekbone like spilled ink. Her bottom lip was split and swollen. Smaller bruises dotted her jawline fingerprints. Alina knew, though Liv would never admit it. And beneath the fluorescent lights of Mercy General's 3rd-floor exam room, the younger woman looked fragile enough to shatter. Alina had already confirmed 2 cracked ribs during the examination. The x-rays didn't lie, even when patients did. Liv, Alina's tone softened as she gently freed her wrist. She pulled over the rolling stool and sat, bringing herself to eye level. I'm your doctor. These photos are for your medical file, that's all, just in case you ever need them. The waitress, barely 24, though tonight she looked a decade older, shook her head frantically. He'll find out. He always finds out. There it was. The confession that wasn't quite a confession. Alina had been a physician for 8 years. She'd worked in emergency medicine long enough to recognize the patterns, the repeat visits, the implausible explanations, the way Liv flinched whenever the exam room door opened too quickly, the way she kept her phone face down on the table, screen dark, as if even the device might betray her. He won't know, Alina said, though the promise tasted like ash. She wasn't naive enough to believe it completely, but she needed Liv to trust her. But you deserve to have proof. You deserve to have options. Liv's shoulders trembled beneath the thin fabric of her shirt. A tear slipped down her bruised cheek, and she wiped it away quickly, wincing as her fingers brushed damaged skin. The silence stretched between them heavy, suffocating. Finally, Liv's shoulders sagged in defeat. She nodded. Alina reached for the Canon camera resting on the counter, her hand steadier than her heartbeat. She'd done this before, photographed injuries for medical records, documented evidence of assault for patients who were ready to press charges. But this felt different. This felt like loading a gun. Turn your head to the left, Alina instructed gently, her professional mask sliding back into place. Just like that, the camera shutter clicked. Liv stared at the pale blue wall, her expression vacant, as Alina moved around her with clinical precision. Left side, right side, close-up of the facial bruising, the split lip, the defensive wounds on her forearms, bruises in the shape of grasping hands. Can you lift your shirt slightly? I need to document the torso injuries. Liv complied wordlessly, revealing the mottled purple and yellow bruising that wrapped around her ribcage like a sick constellation. Alina's jaw tightened, but she kept her expression neutral as she photographed the evidence. Each click of the shutter felt like an accusation. This is what he did to you. This is what you're protecting. This is what will kill you if it continues. When Alina finally lowered the camera, Liv was crying silently, tears streaming down her face without sound. She looked so young in that moment, too young to carry this kind of weight, too young to have learned that love could feel like fists. All done, Alina said softly, setting the camera aside. She grabbed a box of tissues and pressed them into Liv's hands. You did really well. Liv wiped her face carefully, avoiding the bruises. What happens now? Good question. Alina had been asking herself the same thing all night. Protocol dictated she should encourage Liv to file a police report, to seek a protective order, to contact a domestic violence shelter. She'd given those speeches before, calm, rational, perfectly rehearsed, but Liv had heard them all already, and she always went back. Now, Alina said, choosing her words carefully, You rest. I'm going to get you something for the pain, and we're keeping you overnight for observation because of the rib fractures. I can't stay. You can, and you will. Alina's tone left no room for argument. Doctor's orders. I'll call the cafe and let them know you won't be in tomorrow. Fresh panic flashed across Liv's face. No, you can't. He'll know I'm here. He won't. Alina placed a firm hand on Liv's shoulder. I'll tell them you have severe bronchitis and you're contagious. Medical privacy laws protect you, Liv. No one can force me to disclose your actual condition. It was a small mercy, but Liv clung to it like a lifeline. She nodded, exhausted beyond words. Get some rest, Alina said, helping her lie back against the pillows. I'll check on you in a few hours. She dimmed the lights and slipped out of the exam room, closing the door with a quiet click. The hallway was empty, fluorescent lights humming their sterile lullaby. Alina leaned against the wall for a moment, pressing her palms against the cool surface, trying to calm the rage that threatened to crack through her professional composure. 4 times she'd patched up this beautiful young woman and sent her back into danger. Not again. Alina retrieved the camera and headed to her office, a cramped space on the 4th floor that smelled like old coffee and antiseptic. She plugged the camera into her laptop and watched the images upload, each photograph more damning than the last. She'd told Liv they were just for her file. She'd lied. These photos were going to the police tomorrow morning. First thing, whether Liv wanted them to or not. Alina would file the report herself, anonymously if she had to. She'd testify. She'd do whatever it took to get Liv away from the monster who was slowly killing her. The upload finished. Alina stared at the screen, at Liv's battered face frozen in digital clarity, and made a silent promise. This ends now. What she didn't know was that across the city, a man was already asking questions. And he was coming. The cafe smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams. Milo Stevens noticed that first the acrid undertone beneath the usual morning rush of espresso and cinnamon. He noticed everything. It was why he was still alive after 20 years in a business where most men didn't make it past 10. He stepped through the glass door at precisely 7:47 a.m., same as every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 2 months. The bell chimed overhead, and the usual morning chaos paused for half a heartbeat. The barista's hand stilled on the espresso machine. The manager looked up from the register, recognition flickering across his face before he quickly looked away. 2 businessmen in the corner booth suddenly found their newspapers fascinating. Milo was used to it, the ripple effect his presence created, the way rooms rearranged themselves around him like iron filings near a magnet. He'd stopped noticing it years ago, the same way you stop noticing your own reflection. He headed toward his usual table by the window, the one with clear sightlines to both entrances and the kitchen. Old habits. The leather booth was already clean, wiped down by staff who knew better than to make him wait. But something was wrong. His server wasn't here. Milo settled into the booth anyway, his charcoal suit jacket fitting perfectly across shoulders that suggested he did more than sign contracts for a living. He had the kind of face that photographs well but unsettles in person, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that tracked movement with predatory precision, and a mouth that rarely smiled but always seemed on the verge of something. A different waitress approached, young and nervous, her notepad clutched like a shield. "Good morning, Mr. Stevens. Can I get you? Where's Liv?" The question came out quieter than a shout but somehow more commanding. The waitress blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Liv Wouters, the brunette, works Tuesday and Thursday mornings." Milo's tone remained perfectly even, but his fingers had stopped drumming on the table. "Where is she?" "Oh, The girl glanced toward the kitchen, looking for rescue that wasn't coming. She called in sick. "I'm covering her section today. Can I get you your usual? Black coffee, no." "When did she call in?" I don't know, sir. I just know she's not here." The notepad was shaking now. "Would you still get me someone who knows?" It wasn't a request. The waitress fled. Milo sat back, his expression unchanged, but something cold had settled in his chest. Liv didn't call in sick. In 8 weeks of careful observation, she'd never missed a shift. She came in early, left late, and carried bruises she thought her long sleeves and careful makeup concealed. They didn't. He'd noticed the first one 6 weeks ago, a yellowish shadow along her jaw that she'd tried to cover with foundation, then another on her wrist, peeking out when she'd reached across the table to refill his coffee. Then the split lip she'd explained away with a story about biting it in her sleep. Milo had built an empire by reading people, by seeing what they desperately wanted to hide. And Liv Wouters was hiding something that was slowly killing her. The manager emerged from the kitchen. a thin man in his 50s who'd probably been intimidated by Milo since the first handshake. He approached the table with the careful steps of someone walking through a minefield. "Mr. Stevens. Good morning. I understand there's been some confusion. Where's Liv?" The manager's Adam's apple bobbed. "She's out sick. Some kind of respiratory thing, I think. Dr. Denis from Mercy General called it in personally, said she's contagious and—" "Mercy General." Milo repeated the words slowly, letting them settle. "When did the doctor call?" "Late last night. Around 11, maybe?" Said Liv needed at least 3 days of rest. Milo's jaw tightened imperceptibly. 11 p.m. wasn't a routine doctor's visit. 11 p.m. was an emergency. "Thank you." He stood, pulling a money clip from his jacket and placing $200 bills on the table. "For the inconvenience. But you didn't order." Milo was already walking toward the door. Behind him, the manager stared at the cash, then at the other waitress who'd crept close enough to watch. She was younger, barely 20, with wide eyes and the kind of face that hadn't learned to lie yet. "He really liked her, didn't he?" she whispered. The manager pocketed the money and said nothing, but the girl kept talking, her voice dropping even lower. "I hope she's okay. I heard her boyfriend's been—" "Jenna." The manager's tone was sharp. "Get back to work." She bit her lip, but something in her expression shifted, some decision made in the span of a heartbeat. "Mr. Stevens," she called out, loud enough to stop him at the door. He turned. The entire cafe went silent. Jenna walked toward him with the reckless courage of someone too young to fully understand consequences. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "She's not sick," Jenna said quietly. "She's hurt. Her boyfriend, he beats her, has been for months. She's at Mercy General right now because of what he did to her last night." The manager's face went white. "Jenna, shut your—" "She needs help." The young waitress ignored him, her eyes locked on Milo's. "Real help. The kind the police can't give." For a long moment, Milo said nothing. Then he nodded once, a small, precise movement that somehow conveyed more than words. "What floor?" he asked. "I don't know. But Dr. Denis would. She's always the one who treats her." Milo pulled another 100 from his clip and pressed it into Jenna's palm. "Thank you. I didn't tell you anything," she said, but she was smiling small and sad and relieved all at once. "No," Milo agreed. "You didn't." He walked out into the morning sunlight, the bell chiming behind him one last time. His driver was already pulling the black Mercedes to the curb, reading the situation the way good soldiers always did. The door opened before Milo reached it. "Mercy General," Milo said, sliding into the back seat. "And call Nikolai. Tell him I need a name and an address within the hour." "Yes, sir." As the car pulled into traffic, Milo stared out the window at the city he'd built his empire, in a city where justice was a negotiable commodity and protection was something you bought with blood or money. Liv Wouters had neither. But now she had him, and that changed everything. The hospital lobby smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Milo pushed through the sliding glass doors of Mercy General at 8:23 a.m., his presence cutting through the morning chaos like a blade through water. Families clustered near the waiting area. A woman sobbed quietly into her phone, and somewhere down a distant corridor, a code was being called over the intercom. No one looked at him directly, but everyone noticed. He moved toward the information desk with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested he belonged exactly where he was, doing exactly what he was doing. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain, glanced up from her computer screen. Her professional smile flickered when she met his eyes. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'm looking for Dr. Elena Denis," Milo said, his tone perfectly courteous, perfectly controlled. "I need to speak with her. It's urgent." The receptionist's fingers hesitated over her keyboard. "Do you have an appointment, Mr. Stevens?" "Milo Stevens." He didn't elaborate. The name would either mean something or it wouldn't. It did. Her expression shifted, not quite fear, but something adjacent to it. Professional wariness mixed with the kind of recognition that came from hearing a name whispered in certain circles. "Dr. Denis is currently with a patient," she said carefully. "If you'd like to leave a message, I can have her paged when she's available." "I'll wait." Milo gestured toward the lobby seating. "Please page her now and tell her it's regarding Liv Wouters." The woman's eyes widened slightly, just enough to confirm what he'd suspected. She knew the name, which meant Liv was here. Admitted. Being treated. Being protected, perhaps. But not well enough. "One moment, please." She reached for her phone with trembling fingers, speaking in low tones that Milo didn't bother trying to overhear. He'd said what needed to be said. Now he simply needed to wait for the pieces to move. He settled into one of the vinyl chairs near the window, his posture relaxed but his attention razor-sharp. People filtered past nurses, changing shifts, doctors with tablets, visitors carrying flowers and worry. A security guard near the elevator banks kept glancing his direction, hand resting casually near his radio. Milo ignored him. 3 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and a woman in gray scrubs stepped out. Dr. Elena Denise. Milo recognized her immediately, though they'd never met. She had the kind of face that belonged in Renaissance paintings, angular and intelligent, with sharp cheekbones and shoulder-length blonde hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her scrubs were wrinkled from a long shift, and exhaustion shadowed her eyes. But she moved with the confident efficiency of someone who'd fought death and won more times than she'd lost. She spotted him instantly. Their eyes met across the lobby, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition. Perhaps, though not of his face. Recognition of what he represented, who he was. She walked toward him with measured steps, her stethoscope swaying slightly against her chest. "Mr. Stevens." It wasn't a question. He stood. "Dr. Denis, thank you for seeing me. I haven't agreed to see you," she said evenly. "I've agreed to hear why you're asking about one of my patients." "Fair enough. I'd prefer to discuss this somewhere private," Milo said, glancing meaningfully at the receptionist who was absolutely listening. "If you're willing." Elena studied him for a long moment, taking his measure the way doctors did, looking for symptoms of deception or danger. Whatever she saw must have satisfied some internal calculation, because she nodded curtly. "Follow me. And Mr. Stevens?" Her voice dropped lower. "I don't know what you think you know about Liv, but patient confidentiality isn't optional. I'm not here to cause her problems," Milo interrupted gently. "I'm here to solve them." Something flickered in Elena's eyes, surprise, maybe, or the faint ember of hope. She led him toward the elevators, past the security guard whose hand had definitely moved closer to his radio. They rode to the 4th floor in silence, the only sound the mechanical hum of the ascending car. Elena's office was exactly what he'd expected, cramped, cluttered, and smelling of old coffee. Medical journals were stacked on every available surface, diplomas hung crookedly on the wall, and her desk was buried under patient files and empty takeout containers. She closed the door behind them and leaned against it, arms crossed. "Talk." Milo remained standing, hands clasped loosely in front of him. "I'm a regular at the cafe where Liv works. I've been watching her come in with injuries for weeks. Yesterday she didn't show up for her shift. Another waitress told me she was here and why." Elena's expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened slightly. "And what exactly do you think you can do about it?" "More than the police can," Milo said simply. "More than the courts. More than a restraining order that won't be worth the paper it's printed on. You want me to violate medical privacy laws and give you information about an abuse victim so you can what? Handle it yourself?" Elena's voice was cold now, professional armor sliding into place. "I'm a doctor, Mr. Stevens, not an accomplice." "You're a doctor who's treated her 4 times in 3 months?" Milo countered. "You've documented her injuries, encouraged her to press charges, maybe even threatened to call the police yourself. And she's still going back to him." Elena flinched. He'd struck bone. "How long?" Milo continued quietly. "Before he kills her? Before she becomes another statistic? Another failure? That's not..." Elena's voice cracked slightly. She caught herself, taking a breath. "You don't know anything about her situation. I know she's terrified. I know her boyfriend tracks her movements. I know she won't leave him because she either loves him or fears him, probably both." Milo took a single step closer. "And I know you took photographs last night. Evidence you're planning to use." Elena's eyes widened. "How did you?" "Because it's what I would do," Milo said. "Document everything. Build a case. Try to save someone who won't save themselves." The silence between them was heavy with unspoken understanding. "I can't help you," Elena finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You already have," Milo replied. "By confirming she's here. By confirming she needs protection. From her boyfriend. Yes. Not from..." Elena gestured at him, frustrated. "Whatever you are." "What I am," Milo said quietly, "is the only chance she has at surviving this." Elena stared at him, conflict warring across her face. Then her pager buzzed. She glanced down, and her expression changed. "I have to go," she said abruptly. "There's an emergency." But as she reached for the door, she paused. "Room 347, she whispered. "3rd floor. She's sleeping." Then she was gone. Milo stood alone in the cluttered office, staring at the closed door. Room 347. He had what he needed. Elena's hands were shaking. She locked her office door behind her and leaned against it, pressing her palms flat against the wood as if she could physically hold back the decision she'd just made. Room 347. She'd given him the room number. She'd given a known criminal, because that's what Milo Stevens was, despite the tailored suits and controlled demeanor, direct access to a vulnerable patient. A woman who was already running from one dangerous man. What the hell have I done? Her pager buzzed again, but it wasn't a real emergency. She'd lied. There was no code, no crisis demanding her immediate attention. She'd simply needed him out of her office before she said something else she couldn't take back, before she showed him the photographs. Elena pushed off the door and crossed to her desk, shoving aside patient files until she found her laptop. The screen flickered to life, still open to the folder she'd created at 2 a.m. LW, Medical, Documentation, 2026. 37 photographs, each one a testament to brutality, captured in clinical high definition. Elena clicked through them slowly, her medical detachment crumbling with each image. Liv's bruised face, the defensive wounds on her forearms, the mottled discoloration wrapped around her ribcage like a rope burn, the split lip, the fingerprints on her throat that Elena had photographed last, after Liv had finally fallen into exhausted sleep. Evidence. Cold, irrefutable evidence that would hold up in any courtroom, if Liv pressed charges, if she testified, if the system didn't fail her the way it failed so many others. Elena had seen it before: women who found the courage to report, only to watch their abusers walk free on bail, restraining orders that weren't worth the ink, trials that re-traumatized victims while defense attorneys painted them as liars or provocateurs. The system was broken, and Liv would be dead long before it fixed itself. Elena's cursor hovered over the print icon. She'd planned to take these photographs to the police this morning, to file a report whether Liv cooperated or not. Mandatory reporting laws gave her some cover, though Liv's injuries technically fell into a gray area severe enough to warrant concern, but not quite meeting the threshold for non-consensual reporting in cases involving adults. Still, Elena had been prepared to risk it. But now there was another option, a worse option, a more effective option. What I am is the only chance she has at surviving this. Milo's words echoed in her mind, and Elena hated how true they felt. She'd been a doctor long enough to know that some problems couldn't be solved with prescriptions and protocols. Some wounds went deeper than flesh. Her phone buzzed. A text from the nurse's station. "Man in lobby asking for you again. Says it's urgent. Security wants to know if they should escort him out." Elena stared at the message. He'd come back. Why had he come back? She grabbed her laptop and headed for the elevator, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was insane. She was violating every ethical boundary she'd sworn to uphold. But as she descended to the lobby, all she could see was Liv's face, young and terrified and resigned to a fate she thought she deserved. No more. The elevator doors opened. Milo was standing exactly where she'd left him, hands in his coat pockets, expression unreadable. The security guard was hovering nearby, clearly torn between authority and self-preservation. "Dr. Denis," Milo said evenly. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I need 5 more minutes of your time." Elena glanced at the security guard. "It's fine, David. He's with me." David looked doubtful but retreated. "Not here," Elena said quietly. "Follow me." She led him to a small consultation room off the main corridor, windowless, private, designed for delivering bad news to families. She closed the door and set her laptop on the table between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I lied earlier," Elena finally said. "I do know what I can do. And I know what you can do. The question is whether I'm willing to live with the consequences of choosing the latter." Milo's eyes flickered to the laptop. "You have something to show me." It wasn't a question. Elena's hand trembled as she opened the laptop, turning the screen toward him. These were taken last night. For her medical file, for evidence, for, I don't know, insurance maybe, proof that I tried. She clicked through the first few photographs, watching Milo's face for any reaction. There was none. His expression remained perfectly still, but something changed in his eyes, something cold and final, like a door slamming shut on any possibility of mercy. He studied each image with the attention of someone cataloging targets. When Elena reached the photograph of the fingerprint bruises on Liv's throat, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "His name," Milo said quietly. "I can't." "His name, Dr. Denis." Elena closed her eyes. This was it. The point of no return. Once she gave him the name, she became complicit in whatever happened next. But Liv would be safe. Carter, she whispered. Carter Brennan. He works construction. Lives in Riverside, I think. Liv mentioned it once. Milo nodded slowly, committing it to memory. These photographs, he said, gesturing to the screen. Were you really planning to take them to the police? Yes. And you think they would have helped? Alina's throat tightened. I think they would have created a paper trail. Maybe gotten a restraining order. Maybe he would have killed her within a week. The words landed like a slap. You don't know that, Alina said. But her voice lacked conviction. I do. Milo's tone was matter-of-fact, clinical almost. Men like Carter Brennan don't stop because of paperwork. They escalate. The restraining order becomes a challenge. The police involvement becomes humiliation. And Liv becomes a problem that needs to be eliminated. Alina felt something crack inside her chest, some fundamental belief in order and justice and the systems she'd trusted her entire life. So what do we do? She asked, hating the defeat in her voice. We? Milo raised an eyebrow. You've already done your part, Doctor. You saved her life by bringing her here, by documenting the evidence, by making the choice to show me instead of the police. That's not. It is. His voice softened slightly. And it took more courage than you think. Alina looked at the photographs on the screen. Liv's battered face, frozen in digital permanence. What happens to him? She asked. Milo stood, buttoning his coat with deliberate precision. Nothing you need to witness. Nothing that will appear in any medical records. Will he? Alina couldn't finish the question. He'll never touch her again, Milo said simply. That's all you need to know. He moved toward the door, then paused. May I see her? Just for a moment. Alina hesitated, then nodded. Room 347. But if she's awake, she trailed off, uncertain what she was even warning him about. I'll be gentle, Milo promised. Then he was gone. Alina sat alone in the consultation room, staring at the photographs that had just changed everything. She should delete them. She should call the police. She should do 100 things that would absolve her of what was about to happen. Instead, she closed the laptop and whispered a prayer for a man she'd never met. May God have mercy on Carter Brennan's soul. Because Milo Stevens certainly wouldn't. Room 347 was quiet. Too quiet. Milo stood outside the door for a moment, his hand resting on the handle, listening to the mechanical hum of medical equipment and the distant echo of hospital announcements. Behind him, the third-floor corridor bustled with nurses making rounds and orderlies pushing meal carts, but the noise felt distant, muted, as if he'd already crossed into some separate space where normal rules didn't apply. He pushed the door open. The room was small and sterile, painted in those institutional shades of beige that were supposed to be calming but only managed to feel suffocating. Afternoon light filtered through half-closed blinds, casting pale stripes across the linoleum floor. And there, in the hospital bed, was Liv Wouters. She was sleeping or pretending to sleep. Her dark hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink, and even in rest, her face carried the weight of exhaustion that went deeper than physical injury. The bruises looked worse in daylight, more vivid against her pale skin. Purple and black and sickly yellow, each one a signature of violence. An IV line ran into her left arm. Monitors beeped softly, tracking a heartbeat that was steady but too fast, the rhythm of someone whose body couldn't fully relax even in sleep. She looked impossibly young, impossibly fragile. Milo had seen brutality before, had ordered it, witnessed it, occasionally delivered it himself when necessary. Violence was a language he spoke fluently, a tool he wielded with precision. But there was something about seeing it inflicted on someone like Liv, someone kind enough to remember his coffee order, brave enough to smile through pain, foolish enough to protect the man, destroying her, that made something cold and immovable settle in his chest. This wasn't business. This was personal. He moved closer, his footsteps silent on the floor, and that's when her eyes opened. For a heartbeat, they simply stared at each other. Then panic flooded her expression. No. Liv tried to sit up, her hand instinctively reaching for the call button. You shouldn't be here. You can't. He'll know. If he finds out you came, he'll think. Breathe, Milo said quietly, raising one hand in a calming gesture. I'm not here to cause you trouble. Then why are you here? Her voice cracked, hovering between fear and something that might have been hope. How did you even find me? I asked the right questions. He pulled over the visitor's chair and sat, deliberately keeping distance between them. You didn't come to work this morning. I was concerned. Liv's laugh was bitter and broken. You were concerned. You don't even know me. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar and not enough cream, Milo said. I know you always request the early shift even though it pays less. I know you have a scar on your left hand from a cooking accident. When you were 16, you told me that story 3 weeks ago when I asked about it. Her eyes widened slightly. I know, he continued, his voice dropping lower, that someone has been hurting you. Regularly. Systematically. And that you've been protecting him for reasons I'll probably never understand. Tears welled in Liv's eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. It's complicated. It always is. You don't understand Carter. He's not always like this. When he's good, he's... She stopped, swallowing hard. And I love him. I know that sounds stupid, but I do. He just gets stressed. And the drinking makes it worse. And if I could just... Stop. Milo's tone wasn't harsh, but it cut through her spiral with surgical precision. I'm not here to judge your choices, Liv. I'm here to offer you another one. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, wincing as she brushed the bruises. What kind of choice? The kind where Carter Brennan stops being a problem. The room went very still. Liv stared at him, understanding dawning slowly across her battered face. You can't. I didn't ask you to. I don't want anyone to get hurt because of me. Someone already is getting hurt because of you, Milo said gently. You, repeatedly. That's different. It isn't. He leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes locked on hers. How many more times, Liv? How many more hospital visits before he goes too far? Before doctor, Denis is pronouncing you dead instead of treating your injuries? Stop it. Fresh tears streamed down her face. You don't get to come in here and act like you're saving me when you're really just looking for an excuse to... To what? Milo asked. Be the monster you already think I am? That stopped her. I know what people say about me, he continued quietly. I know what I am. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to make you more comfortable with accepting my help. I can't accept this kind of help, Liv whispered. What you're talking about that makes me just as bad as him? No, Milo said firmly. It makes you a survivor. The door opened behind them. Dr. Dennis stepped inside, her expression tight with tension. She took in the scene Milo sitting beside Liv's bed, Liv crying, the heavy atmosphere of a conversation that had crossed boundaries neither of them could walk back. I need to check on my patient, Alina said, but her eyes were on Milo. Alone, if you don't mind. Milo stood. Of course. He turned back to Liv one last time. Think about what I said. You don't have to decide right now. But understand that doing nothing is also a decision, and it's one that has consequences. He moved toward the door, but Liv's voice stopped him. Why? She asked, her voice small and broken. Why do you even care what happens to me? Milo paused in the doorway, his back to her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, because no one should have to live afraid of the person they love, and because I can do something about it. He left without waiting for a response. Alina closed the door behind him and immediately went to Liv's side, checking her vitals with practiced efficiency even as her mind raced. What did he say to you? Alina asked gently. Liv was silent for a long time, staring at the door where Milo had disappeared. He offered me a choice, she finally whispered. What kind of choice? Liv turned to look at her doctor, this woman who'd patched her up so many times, who'd begged her to leave, who'd taken photographs as evidence of crimes Liv had never reported. The kind I'm terrified to make, Liv said, and even more terrified not to. Alina sat on the edge of the bed and took Liv's hand carefully, avoiding the bruises. Then let me make it easier, she said quietly. I've already shown him the photographs. Liv's breath caught. You what? The pictures I took last night. The evidence I said was just for your file. Alina's voice was steady, but guilt flickered in her eyes. I showed them to Milo Stevens, and I told him Carter's name. The silence that followed was suffocating. Why? Liv's voice was barely audible. Alina met her gaze directly. Because keeping you alive matters more than keeping my conscience clean. Liv stared at her doctor, this professional, ethical woman who'd just admitted to betraying patient confidentiality, to collaborating with a criminal, to crossing every line that separated healer from accomplice. What happens now? Liv whispered. Alina squeezed her hand gently. Now, she said, Carter stops being your problem and becomes someone else's. Yes. Liv closed her eyes, tears streaming down her bruised cheeks. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. And in the terrible calculus of survival, silence was its own kind of permission. The construction site was nearly empty by the time Milo arrived. 6:47 p.m. The day shift had ended, equipment sat dormant, and the skeletal frame of what would eventually become a luxury apartment complex cast long shadows across the dirt lot. A few vehicles remained in the makeshift parking area, beat-up trucks belonging to workers too tired or too broke to go anywhere after their shifts. One of them was Carter Brennan's. Milo stood beside his Mercedes, watching the sight with the patience of a predator that had already spotted its prey. Nikolai waited beside him, silent and solid as a wall. The head of security had been with Milo for 15 years, and in that time, he'd learned to read his employer's moods better than most people read books. Tonight, Nikolai recognized something dangerous. The red pickup, Nikolai said quietly, nodding toward a rusted Ford near the chain-link fence. Registered to Carter Joseph Brennan, age 32. 2 priors for assault, both bar fights, both pleaded down. Currently on probation for a DUI. Family? Parents deceased. No siblings. No children registered with the state. Nikolai paused. The girlfriend Liv Wouters isn't listed anywhere. No lease agreements. No shared accounts. He's kept her off paper. Of course he had. Men like Carter understood instinctively that what didn't exist on paper couldn't testify in court. Employment? Day laborer. Been with Hillside Construction for 8 months. Supervisor says he's competent but has a temper. 2 written warnings for getting into it with other workers. Milo nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the red truck. And tonight? He's still inside. 3rd floor of the main structure, finishing ductwork with 2 other guys. They should be wrapping up soon. The others leave first, Milo said. It wasn't a question. Already arranged. They've been told their services aren't needed past 7. Milo checked his watch. 13 minutes. They waited in silence as the sun bled out across the horizon, painting the unfinished building in shades of rust and shadow. At 6:58, 2 men emerged from the site, laughing about something. Hard hats tucked under their arms. They climbed into separate vehicles and drove away without noticing the Mercedes parked in the shadows. Then there was only Carter. At 7:12, he appeared a stocky man in a stained work shirt and jeans, moving with the heavy-limbed gait of someone who'd spent the day doing manual labor. Even from a distance, Milo could see the arrogance in his posture, the way he spat casually onto the ground as he walked. This was the man who'd put his hands around Liv's throat. This was the man who'd fractured her ribs. This was the man who'd taught a kind young woman to flinch at sudden movements and apologize for existing. Milo felt nothing except the cold certainty of what needed to happen next. "Wait here," he said to Nikolai. "Sir, I'll handle this myself." Nikolai's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Some things required a personal touch. Milo walked across the lot, his footsteps crunching on gravel. Carter had just reached his truck when he noticed the approach. He turned, squinting in the fading light, hand instinctively going to his pocket, probably reaching for his keys, but the gesture was defensive. "Help you with something?" Carter's voice was rough, suspicious. "Carter Brennan?" Milo kept his tone conversational, almost pleasant. "Who's asking?" "Someone who needs a moment of your time." Carter's eyes narrowed, scanning Milo from head to toe, taking in the expensive coat, the polished shoes, the air of authority that suggested this wasn't a man who belonged on a construction site. "I don't know you." "No," Milo agreed. "But we have a mutual acquaintance. Liv Wouters." The change in Carter's expression was immediate and telling. His shoulders tensed, his jaw clenched, and something ugly flickered across his face, possessiveness mixed with anger. "What about her?" The words came out like a challenge. "She's in the hospital," Milo said quietly. "Because of you." Carter's laugh was sharp and defensive. "I don't know what she told you, but Liv's clumsy. Always has been. She falls, she bruises easy. It's not my fault. She can't watch where she's going. She has 2 cracked ribs." Milo took a single step closer. "Fingerprint bruises on her throat. Defensive wounds on her arms. Are you going to tell me she did all that falling down?" "I don't have to tell you shit." Carter's voice rose, aggression bleeding through. "I don't know who the fuck you think you are, but you need to mind your own business. Liv and me, that's between us." "Not anymore." Something in Milo's tone made Carter pause, made him really look at the man standing before him, made him realize, perhaps too late, that this wasn't a concerned citizen or an angry friend. This was something else entirely. "You threatening me?" Carter tried to inject bravado into his voice, but it wavered slightly. "I don't make threats," Milo said. "I make promises." Carter's hand went to his phone. "I'm calling the cops." Nikolai appeared from the shadows like a ghost, moving with the silent efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The phone disappeared from Carter's grip before he could dial, and suddenly the construction worker found himself flanked by 2 men who'd transformed the empty lot into a very different kind of space. A space where normal rules didn't apply. "What the fuck, let me go!" Carter tried to pull away, but Nikolai's grip was iron. Milo stepped closer, close enough to see the fear finally dawning in Carter's eyes, close enough to smell the alcohol on his breath because of course he'd been drinking. "Here's what's going to happen," Milo said, his voice deadly calm. "You're going to disappear. Not permanently, I'm not unreasonable. But from Liv's life, permanently. You will never contact her again, never come to her workplace, never drive past her apartment, never so much as think her name. You can't. I can." Milo's eyes were ice. "And I will. Because men like you only understand one language, Carter. And I'm fluent." What happened next occurred with the mechanical efficiency of professionals who'd choreographed violence into an art form. Nikolai forced Carter into the back of a black SUV that had materialized from nowhere. No one screamed. No one called for help. The construction site remained empty and silent, bearing witness to nothing. Milo didn't follow them into the vehicle. He didn't need to. By morning, Carter Brennan would wake up somewhere far from here, hurt enough to remember, scared enough to never forget, and smart enough to understand that Milo Stevens' reach was longer than any distance he could run. His truck would be found abandoned in another state. His apartment would be cleared out overnight. His bank account would be emptied and closed. His employment records would show a voluntary termination. And if anyone asked, though no one would, Carter had simply decided to start fresh somewhere else. Men disappeared in cities like this all the time. Milo walked back to his Mercedes, the night air cool against his face. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph. This wasn't about revenge or justice in any meaningful sense. It was simply about removing a problem, making the world slightly safer for one terrified young woman. He pulled out his phone and sent a single text message to Dr. Denis. "It is done." 3 words. That's all it took to change everything. Alina received the text at 11:47 p.m. She was in her office, pretending to review patient charts, but really just staring at the same page she'd been staring at for the past hour. The words wouldn't focus. Her mind kept circling back to the decision she'd made, the line she'd crossed, the photographs she'd shown to a man who solved problems with methods that didn't appear in any legal code. "It is done." 3 words that changed everything. Her hands trembled as she set down her phone. She should feel relieved. Liv was safe now, truly safe, not the temporary safety of restraining orders or the false comfort of promises that abusers always broke. Carter Brennan was gone. But the weight in Alina's chest suggested relief wasn't the only thing she was feeling. She grabbed her coat and left the office, her footsteps echoing through the empty 4th-floor corridor. The hospital operated on skeleton crew at this hour, just enough staff to handle emergencies, not enough to ask questions about doctors wandering the halls past midnight. Chapter 8. Healing doesn't happen overnight. Room 347 was dark, except for the pale glow of monitors. Alina pushed the door open quietly, expecting to find Liv asleep. Instead, the young woman was sitting upright in bed, staring out the window at the city lights scattered across the darkness like fallen stars. "You asked for me?" Alina said softly, closing the door behind her. Liv turned, and even in the dim light, Alina could see she'd been crying. Her bruised face was wet with tears, her eyes red and swollen. "I know," Liv whispered. "About Carter. About what happened." Alina's heart stopped. "How?" "His brother called my phone, left a voicemail." Liv's voice was hollow, detached. "Said Carter took off. Left town without telling anyone. Cleaned out his apartment and just disappeared." Alina moved closer, her medical instincts warring with her guilt. "Liv, it was him, wasn't it?" "Milo." Liv looked at her doctor with eyes that held no accusation, only a terrible understanding. "You showed him the photographs, and he made Carter go away. There was no point in lying." "Yes." Liv nodded slowly, as if she'd already known the answer. "Is he dead?" "No." Alina sat on the edge of the bed, the same way she had before, when the world had been simpler. "Milo promised me, Carter is alive. Just elsewhere. Somewhere he won't come back from. Because he's too scared to." "Yes." Liv was quiet for a long time, her fingers twisting the thin hospital blanket into knots. "I should be relieved," she finally said. "I should be grateful. I should feel safe for the first time in months. But you don't?" "I don't know what I feel." Fresh tears spilled down Liv's cheeks. "Part of me is glad he's gone. Part of me is terrified of what that makes me, that I'm grateful someone hurt him, scared him, drove him away. And part of me, Her voice cracked. Part of me still loves him. And that's the worst part. That even after everything, even knowing what he did to me, I still... She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Elena wrapped her arms around the young woman carefully, mindful of the broken ribs and bruised flesh. Liv clung to her, shaking with the force of emotions she'd been holding back for too long. "It's okay," Elena murmured, though she wasn't sure anything about this situation was okay. "You're allowed to feel conflicted. You're allowed to grieve, even for something that was hurting you. He wasn't always bad," Liv said between sobs. "In the beginning, he was kind. He made me laugh. He told me I was beautiful. And I kept thinking if I could just be better, do better, love him enough, he'd go back to being that person. But he wouldn't have." Elena pulled back slightly, meeting Liv's eyes. "That person was a mask, Liv. The violence was always underneath. You couldn't have loved it away or fixed it or changed it. That's not how abuse works." "I know that." Liv wiped her face with the blanket. "In my head, I know. But my heart still thinks I failed him somehow." Elena took Liv's hands in hers, squeezing gently. "You didn't fail anyone. He failed you. He failed himself. And the system that should have protected you failed both of us. So you broke it," Liv said quietly. "The system. You went around it." "I did. Do you regret it?" Elena considered the question. Really considered it, with all its implications and consequences. Did she regret violating patient confidentiality? Collaborating with a criminal? Choosing violence over due process? "No," she finally said. "I regret that it was necessary. But I don't regret keeping you alive." Liv nodded slowly, something shifting in her expression. "What happens to me now?" "Now?" Elena stood, moving to the window where Liv had been staring. "Now you heal. We keep you here for another few days while your ribs mend. Then we help you figure out what comes next. I can't go back to my apartment. All my things are there, but we'll arrange for someone to pack your belongings," Elena said, "safely, without you having to go back. I can't afford a new place. I barely afford the one I have." Elena turned to face her. "There are resources, shelters, transitional housing, programs designed for victims." Liv's voice was bitter. "That's what I am now. Officially. A victim who needs charity and pity, and a survivor," Elena interrupted firmly, "who needs support and time and a chance to rebuild. There's no shame in accepting help, Liv. Isn't there?" Liv gestured at herself, at the bruises and the hospital room and the life that had crumbled around her. "I let this happen. I stayed when I should have left. I made excuses when I should have." "Stop." Elena's tone was sharp enough to cut through Liv's spiral. "You survived. That's what matters. Everything else, the should-haves and could-haves, those are traps. Don't fall into them." Liv looked at her doctor with something like wonder. "How are you so sure? About any of this?" "I'm not," Elena admitted. "I'm terrified I made the wrong choice. Terrified of what I've become by making it. But I'm certain of one thing. You deserve a life where you're not afraid. Where you can walk into a room without calculating exit routes. Where you can make mistakes without worrying they'll end in violence." "I don't know if I remember how to be that person," Liv whispered. "Then we'll figure it out together." Elena returned to the bedside. "One day at a time. One decision at a time. Starting with getting you out of this city." "Leave?" Panic flashed across Liv's face. "Where would I even go?" "Anywhere you want. Somewhere Carter doesn't know about. Somewhere you can start fresh without looking over your shoulder every 5 minutes." Elena paused. "I have a colleague in Portland. She runs a clinic that specializes in helping women rebuild after trauma. She owes me a favor. I could make a call." "Portland," Liv repeated, testing the word. "That's across the country." "Yes. I've never been farther west than Ohio." "Then maybe it's time." Liv was quiet, staring at her hands at the IV line, at the bruises circling her wrists like bracelets of violence. "What if I can't do it? What if I'm too broken?" "You're not broken," Elena said firmly. "You're healing. There's a difference. It doesn't feel like it. It will." Elena squeezed her hand. "Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually you'll wake up and realize you went a whole day without being afraid. And then another, and another, until one day, Carter Brennan is just a bad memory instead of the thing that defines you." Tears welled in Liv's eyes again, but these looked different, less despair, more hope. "You really think I can do this?" "I know you can." Elena smiled. You're stronger than you think, Liv. You survived him. Everything else is just details. Liv laughed, a small, broken sound, but genuine. Details. Like starting my entire life over in a city I've never seen. Details, Elena confirmed. They sat together in the quiet hospital room, two women who'd crossed lines neither had expected to cross, bound together by choices that couldn't be undone. Thank you, Liv finally said. For everything. For not giving up on me even when I gave up on myself. That's my job, Elena said. Saving lives. Even when the patient doesn't want to be saved. Is it? Liv met her gaze. Because this feels like more than a job. Elena thought about the photographs, about Milo Stevens, about the system she'd circumvented and the rules she'd broken, about the weight she'd carry for the rest of her career, the knowledge that she'd chosen violence over protocol and would make the same choice again if necessary. Yes, she admitted quietly. It is more than a job. You're more than a patient. You're proof that sometimes the right thing isn't the easy thing, or the legal thing, Elena agreed. Liv settled back against the pillows, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Will I see him again? Milo? I don't know. Why? Because I want to thank him. For giving me something the police never could. What's that? A future without Carter in it. Liv closed her eyes. Even if I don't know what that future looks like yet. Elena dimmed the lights and moved toward the door, but Liv's voice stopped her. Dr. Denise? Yes? You saved my life. I know you think you did it the wrong way, but you saved it anyway. That matters. Whatever guilt you're carrying, let some of it go. Elena's throat tightened. I'll try. Promise? I promise. Liv smiled faintly, already drifting toward sleep. Liar. Elena left the room carrying a burden that felt slightly lighter than before. Maybe Liv was right. Maybe the guilt would fade eventually, replaced by the knowledge that she'd made the hard choice and kept someone alive. Or maybe it wouldn't. Either way, she'd learned something important. Sometimes being a doctor meant knowing when medicine wasn't enough. Sometimes it meant trusting monsters to do what the system couldn't. And sometimes it meant living with the consequences of being willing to save a life by any means necessary. 5 days later, Liv Wouters checked out of Mercy General Hospital. Elena walked her to the main entrance, carrying the single bag that contained everything Liv owned. Now clothes donated by hospital staff, toiletries provided by the Social Services Department, and a bus ticket to Portland tucked safely in the front pocket. You have everything? Elena asked for the third time, her professional mask barely concealing the maternal concern underneath. Everything that matters. Liv adjusted the bag on her shoulder, wincing slightly. The ribs were healing, but sudden movements still hurt. My friend packed up my apartment yesterday, shipped some boxes to Portland. The rest I told her to donate it. Good. Elena had arranged that too, through channels Liv didn't need to know about, making sure Carter's brother or friends couldn't access Liv's belongings, couldn't find clues about where she'd gone. The morning was crisp and bright, the kind of spring day that promised new beginnings. A taxi idled at the curb, waiting to take Liv to the bus station. Your colleague in Portland, Liv said nervously. Dr. Chen. You're sure she's expecting me? I spoke with her yesterday. She has a room ready and a job waiting receptionist at the clinic. Flexible hours, fair pay. It's not glamorous, but it's a start. It's perfect. Liv's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to thank you for all of this. Stay safe. Build a life worth living. That's thanks enough. Elena pulled her into a careful hug. And Liv, if you ever need anything, I know where to find you. They separated, both blinking back emotion. Liv moved toward the taxi, then paused. Dr. Denis, will you tell him? Tell who? Milo, that I made it out okay. That I'm... She searched for the right word. That I'm grateful. Elena nodded. I'll tell him. Liv climbed into the taxi, and Elena watched it disappear into traffic, carrying away a young woman who'd survived something that killed too many others. She stood there long after the taxi vanished, breathing in the city air, feeling the weight of the past week settling into her bones. She'll be okay. Elena didn't turn around. She'd somehow known he'd be here. Milo stood a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, looking exactly as he had the first time they'd met. Composed, controlled, dangerous. You've been watching the hospital, Elena said, making sure there were no complications. Carter? Still gone, still scared, still smart enough to stay away. Elena finally looked at him. Liv wanted me to thank you. No thanks necessary. Milo moved to stand beside her, both of them watching the morning traffic flow past. I didn't do it for gratitude. Why did you do it? He was quiet for a long moment. Because I could. Because she couldn't. Because someone needed to. That simple. That simple. He glanced at her. And you? How are you managing the aftermath? I'm a criminal now, Elena said. Technically, I violated patient confidentiality, conspired with organized crime, and enabled vigilante justice. Technically, it should bother me more than it does. But it doesn't. No. Elena exhaled slowly. It doesn't. Which might be the most disturbing part of all. Milo's expression softened slightly, barely perceptible. But there. You did the right thing in the wrong way. That's not corruption, Dr. Denis. That's pragmatism. Is that what you call it? Pragmatism? Among other things. He turned to face her fully. The world isn't black and white. Most people spend their whole lives pretending it is, following rules that don't account for edge cases and exceptions. You had the courage to see gray and act accordingly. Courage. Elena laughed bitterly. I violated my Hippocratic oath. You saved a life. Seems like the oath worked exactly as intended. That's not. She stopped, realizing he was right in a way that made her uncomfortable. You have an answer for everything, don't you? Occupational requirement. They stood in companionable silence, two people who'd crossed paths for the worst of reasons, and somehow ended up on the same side. What happens now? Elena finally asked. Do we just pretend this never happened? Go back to our separate lives? If you want. And if I don't? Milo studied her carefully. Then you have my number. And if you ever encounter another situation where the system fails someone who deserves better, you call me. That's not I can't make a habit of this. I'm not suggesting you should. His tone was serious. But now you know what's possible. What options exist outside the conventional channels. That knowledge doesn't disappear just because you wish it would. Elena knew he was right. She'd crossed the Rubicon. There was no uncrossing it. I should go, she said. I have rounds in 20 minutes. Dr. Denis? She paused. For what it's worth, Milo said quietly. I think you're an excellent physician. Liv was lucky to have you. Liv was lucky to have us both, Elena corrected. In the worst possible way. Maybe. He smiled small and genuine. But she's alive. That matters more than method. Elena walked back into the hospital, leaving Milo standing alone in the morning light. She had patients waiting, lives to save through proper channels and legal methods, but tucked into her phone's contacts was a number she'd never called but would never delete, just in case. Because she'd learned something these past few days. Sometimes the monsters weren't the ones breaking the law. Sometimes they were the ones protecting people the law had abandoned. And sometimes, that made all the difference. 3 months passed before Elena saw Milo Stevens again. It happened on a Tuesday evening appropriately, since Tuesdays had started all of this. She was leaving the hospital late, exhausted from a double shift, when she noticed a familiar Mercedes idling near the parking structure. Milo stood beside it, patient as always. Dr. Dennis. He nodded in greeting. I hope I'm not intruding. That depends. Elena adjusted her bag on her shoulder. Why are you here? I thought you'd want to know. He pulled out his phone, opening a message thread. Liv sent me this yesterday. He handed her the phone. The message was simple but profound. Started college classes this week. Business management. Trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. Better late than never, right? Portland is beautiful. I'm happy. Thank you for making this possible. Both of you. Below the text was a photo, Liv standing on what looked like a campus quad, smiling genuinely, the bruises long faded from her face. She looked young again. Hopeful. Alive. Elena felt something crack open in her chest, relief so intense it was almost painful. She's okay, she whispered. She's better than okay. Milo took the phone back. She's thriving. They stood there in the parking lot as the sun set behind the city skyline, casting everything in shades of amber and gold. I deleted them, Elena said suddenly. The photographs. Wiped them from my computer, my backup drives, everywhere. They don't exist anymore. Good. They served their purpose. They did. Elena looked at him, this man who'd entered her life like a storm, and changed everything about how she understood justice and protection, and the cost of doing what was right. I haven't needed to call you, she said. Since Liv. No other cases like hers. I'm glad. Milo's expression was sincere. I hope you never do. But if I did, I'd answer. Simple. Definitive. True. Elena nodded slowly, accepting this strange alliance they'd formed. This understanding between a doctor who'd broken her oath and a criminal who'd kept his word. The photographs, she said thoughtfully. I keep thinking about them. What they represented. Evidence? More than that. Elena chose her words carefully. They were proof. Not just of what Carter did to Liv, but of what the system wouldn't do for her. They were documentation of failure, medical, legal, social, and in your hands, they became something else entirely. Power. Yes, she met his eyes. Power to act when action was needed, to protect when protection wasn't available through conventional means. They were never really meant for courtrooms, were they? No, Milo agreed quietly. They were meant for people like me. People who understand that sometimes the truth doesn't need a judge and jury. Sometimes it just needs someone willing to act on it. That's a dangerous philosophy. Yes. It worked, though. Yes. Elena laughed, soft and slightly broken. I'm supposed to regret this. Everything we did. Everything we chose. But when I saw that photo of Liv, smiling like she'd forgotten what fear felt like, you didn't regret it. Not even a little. They stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd learned the same hard lesson. That morality was more complicated than rulebooks suggested, and that sometimes saving a life required methods medical school never taught. Thank you, Elena said finally, for showing me that there are other ways to help people, even if those ways are illegal, unethical, violent. I was going to say complicated, but yes, those too. Milo smiled. You're welcome. And Dr. Dennis? For what it's worth, I think you'd make an excellent ally, if you ever decide conventional medicine isn't enough. Is that a job offer? It's an observation. He opened his car door. The world needs more people willing to cross lines when crossing them is the only way forward. You did that for Liv. That takes a special kind of courage. Or a special kind of corruption. Perhaps they're the same thing. He slid into the driver's seat. Good night, Dr. Dennis. Try not to work yourself to death. Good night, Mr. Stevens. Try not to... She paused. Actually, do whatever it is you do. Apparently it works. He laughed, genuine and warm, and drove away into the gathering darkness. Elena stood alone in the parking lot, her phone buzzing with patient updates and shift schedules and all the normal demands of her normal life. But she wasn't quite normal anymore. She was something different now. Something changed by the knowledge that justice wasn't always legal, protection wasn't always peaceful, and sometimes the right choice meant trusting monsters to do what angels couldn't. The photographs were gone, deleted from existence, but their impact remained. They'd saved a life. Not through courtrooms or police reports or any official channel. They'd saved a life by ending up in the right hands at the right time, hands willing to wield power when power was needed, to cross lines when lines needed crossing, to do what the system wouldn't. And in the end, maybe that's all evidence really was. Proof that someone had witnessed suffering and refused to look away. Proof that truth mattered, even when the law didn't care. Proof that sometimes the photographs meant for one purpose could fulfill another. Better one if shown to someone brave enough to act on them. Elena walked to her car, carrying that knowledge like a secret. She was still a doctor, still a healer, still bound by oaths and ethics and professional standards. But she was also something else now. She was someone who understood that those oaths had limits, and that sometimes breaking them was the only way to keep them. The city lights flickered on as darkness fell, and Elena drove home through streets that looked the same but felt different. Somewhere across the country, Liv Wouters was attending college classes and learning to live without fear. Somewhere in this city, Carter Brennan was gone, never to return. And somewhere in the spaces between law and justice, a doctor and a criminal had formed an alliance neither would have chosen, but both understood was necessary. The photographs were destroyed, but their legacy lived on, in a young woman's smile, in a doctor's guilty conscience, in a mafia boss's quiet satisfaction, and in the uncomfortable truth they all now carried. Sometimes the truth doesn't need a courtroom. It just needs someone powerful enough to act on it. She needed air. She needed space. She needed Dr. Denis. Elena spun around. Milo stood at the end of the hallway, still wearing his dark coat, looking exactly as composed as he had that morning. As if the past 16 hours hadn't included conspiracy, evidence tampering, and whatever had happened to Carter Brennan. How did you get up here? Her voice came out sharper than intended. I walked. He moved toward her with that unsettling calm. The security guard recognized me from this morning. He assumed I had clearance. You don't. I know. Milo stopped a respectful distance away. But I needed to speak with you, and I suspected you'd still be here. Alina crossed her arms, a defensive gesture she recognized even as she did it. What happened to him? Does it matter? Yes. The word came out fierce. Yes, it matters. I need to know what I've done. Her voice cracked. What I've helped you do. Milo studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes revealing nothing. Then he gestured toward a waiting area at the end of the hall, empty chairs, vending machines, the kind of liminal space where difficult conversations happened. They sat. Carter Brennan is alive, Milo said quietly. Hurt, frightened, and convinced that returning to this city, or contacting Liv ever again, would be a fatal mistake. But alive. Alina exhaled shakily. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. Where is he? Somewhere else. Somewhere he'll stay if he values his life. Milo's tone suggested the conversation about Carter's whereabouts was closed. His truck will be found abandoned in Ohio tomorrow. His apartment has been cleared. His employment terminated. To anyone who asks, he simply left. And if he comes back? He won't. The certainty in those two words was more chilling than any threat could have been. Alina pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to ward off the headache building behind her temples. I violated every ethical principle I've ever held. I broke patient confidentiality. I collaborated with... She gestured at him, searching for the right word. A criminal, Milo supplied helpfully. Yes. She dropped her hands, meeting his gaze. I helped a criminal enact vigilante justice on a man who, legally speaking, hasn't even been charged with a crime. Legally speaking, Milo said. He'd beaten his girlfriend badly enough to fracture her ribs. But you're right, no charges were filed. No police report was made. No trial would have occurred. He leaned back in his chair. So tell me, doctor, what would have happened if you'd taken those photographs to the police instead? Alina wanted to argue, wanted to defend the system she'd always believed in, the proper channels, the legal processes, the infrastructure designed to protect the vulnerable. But she couldn't. He would have been arrested, she said slowly. Maybe. If the DA thought they had enough evidence, if Liv agreed to testify, if a dozen other conditions aligned perfectly. And then, bail. Probably released within 24 hours. The words tasted bitter. He'd be told to stay away from Liv. A restraining order would be issued. He'd agree to anger management classes. And then, Alina closed her eyes. He'd violate the restraining order. Maybe not immediately. Maybe he'd wait a few weeks, let things cool down. But eventually, he'd find her. And he'd be angrier than before, humiliated by the arrest, furious about the charges, convinced she'd betrayed him. And Liv would probably be dead within a month. The admission felt like swallowing glass. Silence stretched between them, heavy, undeniable. I know what I am, Milo said quietly. I don't pretend otherwise. I've done things that would horrify you, Dr. Dennis. Things I can't undo and wouldn't apologize for. But I understand power, how it works, how to wield it, and most importantly, how to use it to protect people the system has failed. That doesn't make it right. No, he agreed. It makes it necessary. Alina looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who'd walked into her hospital asking about a waitress he barely knew. Who'd tracked down an abuser and removed him from existence with the efficiency of someone erasing a typo. Who sat here now, calmly explaining why violence was sometimes the only answer. How do you live with it? She asked. The things you've done? Milo was quiet for a long moment, and something almost human flickered across his face. I don't lose sleep over the guilty, he finally said. The men who choose violence, who prey on the vulnerable, who believe power gives them permission to destroy others. I don't mourn them. I don't regret what happens to them. And the collateral damage, the people caught in the crossfire? I avoid it. His tone was firm. That's the difference between me and the men I remove. I have rules, limits, lines I won't cross. He paused. Carter Brennan is alive because Liv didn't ask me to kill him. If she had, he let the sentence hang. Aina felt cold. You would have? Without hesitation. The casual honesty of it was somehow worse than a lie would have been. This is insane, Alina whispered. I'm sitting here discussing murder with a mafioso, Milo supplied. Criminal, monster, all of the above. He smiled, a small, sad expression that didn't reach his eyes. Yes. But I'm the monster who saved Liv's life, and you're the doctor who made that possible. Alina wanted to protest, wanted to argue that she'd had other options, that there had been a better way. that the system would have worked if she'd just given it a chance. But she couldn't. Because deep down, in a place she didn't want to examine too closely, she knew he was right. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now? You go back to being a doctor. You treat patients, save lives, uphold all those ethical principles you're so concerned about." Milo stood, buttoning his coat. "And you carry the knowledge that sometimes, not always, but sometimes the right thing isn't the legal thing." He moved toward the elevator, then paused. "Liv will recover," he said without turning around, "physically and emotionally. She'll leave this city, start somewhere new. And eventually she'll forget what Carter's fists felt like. That's what you gave her, Dr. Denis, a future, by trading my soul." "No." Milo finally looked back at her. "By understanding that some souls aren't worth saving, and some are worth bending the rules for." The elevator doors opened, and he stepped inside. "If you ever need me," he said as the doors began to close, "you know where to find me." Then he was gone. Alina sat alone in the empty waiting area, staring at the closed elevator doors. Her phone buzzed. A text from the night nurse. "Patient in 347 is asking for you." "Liv." Alina stood on shaking legs and headed for the stairs. She'd made her choice. Now she had to live with it. Thanks for staying with this story. Right till the final moment, you're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.